Hello, welcome to Sprue Models Kit Review time. Today we've got something completely different. Okay, what we've got here is Hobby Boss's new mortar unit. Now this is the M252 mortar in 1/3 scale. Yes, you heard me right, 1/3 scale. Okay, when this first came along, I thought it was a mortar crew with perhaps some of the bags at the back and obviously the figures and the diorama. So it's like a mini diorama in 1/35 scale, something like that. Or even maybe sort of 1/12, okay? When it turned up, it came as a bit of a surprise that it was 1/3 scale. So what I'm thinking, does that mean you get the figures in it as well? Because like, isn't that like bigger than Action Man size or G.I. Joe size and things like that? Anyway, yes, I was completely wrong. So, somewhat is one of these things, you see it, I think, oh yeah, good review, we'll get that in, show you guys, and then it turns out and I'm like, what? Anyway, so, on the box, as you can see, a very nice little mini diorama, okay? Then we've got a little about what we've got in the box. Okay, so we've actually got the tubes itself, the actual mortar, the different angles of it. We've actually got a mortar itself, and we've got a long pipe and a short pipe. Not too sure what they're for, if we're like, okay. It's basically the standard 81mm mortar set. Okay, so your kit number for this one is 81012. Okay, and around here we got some CAD work showing exactly what it's like. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I was reviewing this, you know, and looking at it and it turned up, I thought, oh yeah, well that's quite nice and all the rest of it. Put it to one side, haven't looked at it all week. I had some of the guys around here last week and I was like, oh, have you seen this? Anyway, they opened up the box and it was like, it's 1/3 scale. And when you think of 1/3 scale, you tend to be a little bit lost, you know, because it's not a typical scale. It's not the type of scale perhaps you use all the time. So you think, okay, how big can it be? Really nice. Okay. So, this is what we've got in the box. It's massive, huge, incredibly big, okay? So anyway, let me get the usual blurb bit out of the way and then we're going to look at the parts. Keep you in suspense for that one. So we've got the usual crib sheet, what's coming out and all the rest of it. Okay, we've got the colour call out and we've got the instructions themselves. Now I'm going to leave the camera wide angle because let's face it, it's going to need it in a minute. Okay, obviously there's not much to this, but you've got a lot of plastic purely because of the scale of it all, okay? So we've got various items down here for the guide, for the dial, for the sighting system, various things. The tube itself is quite easy, two bits going together, as you can see. Okay, and then we've got the end cap going on, okay, and then obviously working its way the way through with the guidance systems and the rails being put onto it, as you can see all the way down here. All right, then a case of putting those sub assemblies together. So we've actually got the brace for it, the foot plate being put on, and these areas. Now down here you've got the short copper pipe, okay, and we have the long copper pipe somewhere as well. So this is actually for the system as to how it's going to bed in and go right the way through, and you don't cement this, so you can actually maneuver it and adjust it, okay, right the way through. The mortar itself, as you can see, pretty straightforward. Again, it's nice that it's one end and caps and it's not two halves going together. All right, then we've got the end piece right the way through, and we've got the actual motor itself on the back end there. Okay, pretty straightforward, and there it is. So let's face it, there's not a lot to this. Okay, color call out is black. Oh no, they have got other colors: olive drab, black, dark black, flat black, green black, steel. Okay, as you can imagine, not much to that as well. So what have we ended up with? At the end of the day, I think this is more a collector's type model than your standard one you might find out there. Now, we've seen in the past 1/3 scale weapons, firearms, things like that, all of that, but we have never seen a mortar before. So, as you can see, what we've got down here is extremely heavy. This is actually very, very thick plastic. This isn't just the thin piece. This is very thick. It's obviously ribbed, as you can imagine. Steady at the back. Okay, ejector pins all in the inside. We've got some very nice guide to try and get this as seamless as possible. I don't know how well you can see it, perhaps on the closer cameras. We've actually got grooves running down. So instead of your standard locating tabs, you might be able to see down here on this side, it's all grooved on here. So you've got your male side and the female. So it should line up a lot better. And as you can see on the close-up, you can go through. So we've got no sink marks, no ejection marks, or anything else on the outside of it. It's all down on the inside, which is absolutely fine. It gives you a little bit of what goes on inside a mortar. Basically, we'll drop down to about here, the end boat, the flattest bit here. It's explosion down here, it can only go one way, it goes out the end. It is simple as that, okay? It's basically a cannon on the vertical. So, what have we got? We'll do that last because that's the mortar. So let's have a look at some of the parts and see what type of detail. Now the trouble is, again, because it's a big chunky piece of military equipment, it's very heavy, so you're not expecting to have fine little details, because let's face it, it's not going to have it, alright? So as you can see down in here, it is what it is. At the end of the day, if I just drop, oh, we've got big sprues in there and it will come out. But as you can see, you've got various items that are going to make this up. Things like the bolt heads, the things like that, okay, and all of those areas. And what I'm thinking, to be honest, is because this is more a collector's piece, you'd have this on a display to show it just like a piece of military hardware. I would be inclined to make some changes to this, okay? And this is something I saw this when I had a quick skimmy through it before, but looking down in here now, where you've got these bolts in there, I'd be inclined to replace them for actual metal bolts. And it wouldn't be rocket science to change things like this on this right the way through, just to make it look and feel and obviously a little bit more sort of realistic. That's not to say though that obviously using your standard metallizer paint you can't do bolts and bluing and scratching and scrapes and all the rest of it. But generally it's big, it's heavy. The sprue itself, I don't know if you can see, that's got a twist on it as well, where it's thick, heavy plastic moulding. It tends to do that as it cools, it contorts and changes and everything else like that. But generally really nice down there. Well, we'll get this guy out of the way. Okay, what we've got here is obviously the base plate. Okay, so this is the foot pad, driven down into the dirt, bumps in, spreads the shock of it, stops the tube disappearing through the floor, okay, and everything else like that. It is what it is. You've got the usual ejector ports going in. This is where the injection goes into the mould, so when it's pulled out they have a bit and usually just chop them. Okay, so that is why it's on that side. We've got some little bit of detailing down underneath, everything else not too much down there, but again it is what it is, because in reality it's a one-piece cast unit. Now we've got a big old area here. Okay, huge sprue. Okay, so obviously we've got various parts down here for the sighting system, the guide and everything else. The only thing I would say, it would have been nice to see better textures, shall we say, on some of this gear. Down in here, as you can see, we've actually got the sight itself. It is something or nothing. There's no real detail to it. If you're going to do something like it, at least make it realistic and something on there. It wouldn't have been rocket science to replace this with a rubber end piece that would go over, because obviously this is the sight for looking down and getting all important measurements and that in there. Why they didn't do that is beyond me. Again, things like the bolt heads here, you know, we've got this little screw here. It looks crap, if we're honest. There's only one way to put it. Again, just looking at it all over it, it looks plasticky. It'd be one of those things, once it's painted it'll look a lot better, but I'm just surprised that they haven't put little textures in there, a little bit of texturing into the casting and things like that, as this thing will probably have, and all the rest of it. But generally it is a big heavy duty lump, and that's the thing to it. So there we go. So we've got part of the mortar itself down the back end for the tube. Sorry, the front end for the tube as it goes down there and everything else like that. Everything else pretty much standard. No any flash. There's no flash. There's, well, nothing really on this. It is what it is. It is just a piece of hardware. Then we've got another cap. Is that the top one? One of the top ones, I think. Down on there, and we've got these two, which are very heavy duty bits of brass. These aren't just thin stuff. As you can see, it's got a good internal diameter of 1 mil thickness, so it is heavy stuff. This isn't just like a piece of thin brass tube. It is heavy duty, which is quite nice. Okay, so one is the pin that goes right the way through, I do believe. The other one, I think, is the sight handle or the adjustment handle. So yeah, that's quite nice on that. And then last up, we've got this, which is on mortar, he says, stabbing his hand. Okay, so that is the actual mortar itself. Nice to see we've actually got the arming screw and they got the divot in there, the bit. The only thing that's unfortunate, we have got quite a heavy seam line running down the side, but in this scale it's pretty easy to change it. We've actually got the rings, the tail fins, all moulded in one, which again, nice thing. The only trouble is all of this sprue, particularly if you can see it down there, it's got heavy duty seam lines between the two, or the burring line as we call it, okay? So going to have a little bit of a clean up, but everything else actually doesn't look too bad at all, if I'm honest. That's pretty nice. It has got a little bit of texture down here in the warhead itself, but it would be nice if it had a little bit more, that the screw perhaps was a separate and you could drop it in. That way you could give it scraping, chipping and everything else like that for the arming screw. Very nice indeed. Okay, so there we go. That is something odd, something different. Now, who's this for? I think this is more for the collector. Let's face it, it's too big just to put on your shelf, because this thing is going to be that big, plus a bit with the end on. So it's going to be quite a lump. If you've got measurements on the box, no, I don't think they did. So it is going to be something a little bit big. Now, if you're a mortar crew, you know, you're used to using the 81mm and all the rest of it, you want to have something in your display, then obviously it is definitely for you. Personally, I would have loved to see more detail, but, and here we go again, this is where you could go a little bit further with this. This is where you could actually replace some of these plastic parts with metal parts or upgrade them and things like that. The screws, the things like that, I've been trying to drill them out and replace them with real screws. And bits and pieces like that. It's a shame as well that I imagine down here there is going to be some little weld marks and things like that running between things, like this guy down in here. I assume there would have been a weld or something else running down in here. There is no sign of things like that, so again, it would have been nice to have a little bit of texturing, little bits of, you know, in the metal, so to speak, so it enables you as a modeler. I know it's going to look factory fresh as it is here, but let's face it, everybody's going to want to put a little bit of weathering on it of some way or other. And even this ring, you can see the two rings around the top. These, again, they're quite softly molded in. It would have been nice if they were a little bit more sort of, you know, mechanically welded into place and all the rest of it. But there we go. So there we go. That is something completely different. If you are into your military equipment and you want to start a sort of 1/3 collection and all the rest of it, then definitely this could be something for you to have a look at. If not, I think it's one of those ones where too big, too much room it's going to take up and everything else for such a limited item. I think if this was in sort of, you know, 1/6 and definitely in 1/12, then obviously be on to a winner. But 1/3 is just a little bit too big.